Hey guys, welcome back to T-Bones Tech. In today's video, we are comparing the Canon T8i against the Canon EOS M50 Mark II. So first off, both these cameras do share the exact same 24.1 megapixel APS-C size sensor. So as far as image quality goes, they're going to be basically the exact same on both of them. They also share the exact same Digic 8 image processor. So again, as far as low light performance goes, again, they're basically the exact same camera. The biggest difference here is, of course, the M50 is a mirrorless camera and the Canon T8i is a DSLR. Now, for those of you who don't know the difference between a DSLR and a mirrorless camera, I'm going to go over that very quickly. Basically, a DSLR has an actual optical viewfinder, so the camera can be completely powered off and you can still look down the camera because you're looking through a mirror. But of course, here on a mirrorless camera, there isn't going to be a mirror. When you look down the viewfinder, you're actually looking at an OLED display, which allows you to actually record video while looking down the top viewfinder on the Canon EOS M50, where of course you never can do that with the Canon T8i. That is a really big advantage for video on the M50 Mark II. Now also the M50 Mark II takes Canon's M lenses, which are very nice and compact. This is a 15 to 45 millimeter lens. You can see how small that lens is. And then here on the Canon T8i, they have EFS lenses, which are considerably bigger than those M lenses. So you get much smaller lenses with the M50. Now for about $80, Canon does sell an adapter, so you can adapt your EFS lenses or your EF lenses to the Canon EOS M lens. So with the Canon EOS M50 Mark II, you actually kind of have the best of both worlds. You can use those older EFS and EF lenses, and you can also use these nice and portable lightweight M lenses, so that's really cool. Now the M50 Mark II is also much more lightweight than the Canon T8i. The M50 Mark II body only is going to weigh in at 387 grams, and the Canon T8i weighs in at 515 grams, so quite a big weight difference between these two cameras. Now an advantage of the T8i with its optical viewfinder is actually going to have a lot better battery life than the Canon EOS M50 Mark II. So here with the Canon T8i, we can actually shoot 800 shots on a single battery life, and then here on the M50 Mark II, unfortunately, we only have 309 pictures on a single battery because the M50 being a lot smaller has a smaller battery, and of course also the EVF is going to take up a lot more juice than of course a mirror, which takes absolutely no electricity to work. Now as far as high-speed shooting goes, the Canon EOS M50 might be small, but it definitely packs a punch with 10 frames per second in continuous shooting mode. So you can hear that's extremely fast on the EOS M50, and here on the Canon T8i, because it has that mirror that needs to flip up every time it takes a picture, we are limited to only 7 frames per second. So still very fast, but not quite as good as the Canon EOS M50 Mark II. Now as far as overall usability and all the controls here go, I definitely prefer the Canon T8i because it fits my hand a lot better and also has a ton of manual controls here on this camera, including a little aperture wheel here on the base, and all the buttons on the Canon T8i are a lot bigger than on the EOS M50. Here with the EOS M50, everything is really small and you have to be very precise with your button pressing, which can get a little bit annoying, where, like I said, just a lot more comfortable here on the Canon T8i. So if I had to use one every single day, I'd probably go ahead and pick up the Canon T8i for still photography, just for that reason alone. Of course, if you're on tripod, that's not really going to matter nearly as much. Both of these two cameras are equipped with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which is really nice because you can actually use your smartphone to control these two cameras completely remotely, and you can actually use your phone as a live viewfinder rather than using the touchscreen from pretty far distances, which is really nice. And of course, you can also transfer the pictures that you take with these cameras to your smartphone, so it makes it very easy to post those pictures to social media. Now, a big advantage of the T8i, in my opinion, is the SD card slot is located here on the side of the camera, and it is actually located here on the bottom of the camera of the Mark II, which is definitely annoying. And the reason for that is if you have your camera mounted to a tripod, the tripod plate is probably going to block the door here on the Mark II, but here on the T8i, of course, because it's on the side, the tripod is not going to block access to that SD card. This might not sound like something that's very important, but it actually is if you're using these cameras in a somewhat professional environment. But if you're just using these cameras leisurely, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. Both these two cameras have a 3.5mm microphone input, so you can easily attach a shotgun microphone or even a wireless microphone to both these two cameras, and that little microphone slot is on the left side of both these two cameras. They also both have HDMI and USB here on the side of the camera, and something that the Canon T8i has that the M50 Mark II doesn't have is actually a wired shutter release. So with the T8i, we can actually plug a wired shutter release into this camera, and you can't do that here on the M50 Mark II. That really doesn't matter because, again, we can control it remotely from our phone, but it's just something that is lacking on the Mark II that the T8i does have. Now, probably the biggest upgrade of the Mark II over the Canon T8i is its ability to output 1080p video clean, which is absolutely great for using this camera as a webcam, and unfortunately you don't have a clean output of the HDMI on the Canon T8i. Now, of course, also the M50 Mark II is going to be a much better vlogging camera than the Canon T8i, not because the video quality is going to be worse or better, but because it is so small and lightweight. You can easily use the Mark II for vlogging. We're here on the Canon T8i. It's going to be much more bulky, and it's not going to be nearly as good for running and gunning as the M50 Mark II is. Now, as far as video goes, both these cameras can film 4K video at 24 frames per second, but here we can see there is a 1.6 times crop factor when filming 4K on both these cameras. So if I switch back to 1080p video, we can see the frame gets much wider here, and again, if I zoom back to 4K video, we can see it crops in, which is definitely annoying and not great for vlogging, but they both definitely can film 4K video at 24 frames per second. They can also film 1080p video at 60 frames per second, and then of course 1080p video at 30 frames per second as well. Now, the big advantage that the M50 Mark II has over the Canon T8i is the fact that the M50 can actually film high frame rate video. So here on the M50, we can see if we go over to movie recording quality, we can actually see that we have a high frame rate section here. So if we go over here and enable that, we can see we can record 720p video at 120 frames per second, which is absolutely great for slow motion video, and unfortunately that option is not available for us on the Canon T8i. Of course, 1080p video quality is not really that great, but it is a nice option to have on the M50 Mark II, and unfortunately it was not available on the T8i. Now, as far as pricing goes, the body only of the M50 Mark II is going to run you $599, and the body only of the Canon T8i is going to run you $749. So there's actually a $100 difference between both these two cameras, and I really can't understand why. I'm guessing it costs a little bit more money to produce the optical viewfinder on the Canon T8i, but other than that, they share the exact same sensors and everything, so I really don't understand why it costs so much more to buy the Canon T8i. So for that reason, and for that reason really alone, I would recommend picking up the Canon EOS M50 Mark II over the Canon T8i. But at the end of the day, both these cameras are really fantastic, and you take great pictures with either one of them, but I think it's really going to come down to price here, and again, that's why I would pick the Canon EOS M50 Mark II over the Canon T8i. I just really can't justify spending the extra $150 for that T8i. I'd rather spend $150 extra and buy a nice lens for the Mark II. But of course, those are the prices as of when filming this video. The prices are definitely going to change, so I'm going to leave a link in the description down below to both the Canon EOS M50 Mark II and the Canon T8i for current pricing and availability. If the prices of these change and the T8i becomes cheaper, I definitely wouldn't hesitate picking that one over the Canon EOS M50 Mark II. Well, that's all I got for you guys in this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to give me a big thumbs up down below, and of course, make sure to subscribe button, and then you'll be notified every single time I upload a brand new video just like this one to my YouTube channel. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.